Happy 40th WrestleMania. No, literally, happy 40th. So yeah, WrestleMania is this weekend, and to look back at the past, I wanted to do a top 10 list of my top 10 favorite WrestleManias of all time. To talk about the past 39 years of WrestleMania, this top 10 list wasn't easy, but I finally put it together. I had been working through it all throughout the month of March. And yes, I forgot to let you know back at my uncensored 1997 review, my April pay-per-view I plan to do is Spring Stampede 1999. That will come a little bit after I do this show, or this video. So, let alone and behold, this is my top 10 favorite WrestleMania pay-per-views, or top 10 best WrestleMania pay-per-views, or top 10 favorite WrestleManias. So these are just my top 10 favorite WrestleManias. And starting off the list, coming in at number 10 is WrestleMania 5. 1989's WrestleMania 5 from Atlantic City, New Jersey. And yes, I know this was the other WrestleMania that was hosted. Yes, Donald Trump hosted WrestleMania 2 years in a row. Yes, I know this was a show hosted by Donald Trump, but I'm not a Trump fan, so don't worry, I'm not going to be going into all that detail and all that jazz. But yeah, WrestleMania 5 from Atlantic City, New Jersey, it was a really good WrestleMania. There was a lot of stuff that kept me invested from beginning to end, whether it be from the opening match with Hercules taking on King Haku. We had Jesse Ventura's reaction to the whole No Holds Barred movie announcement. Oh, and let us not forget, I did enjoy Andre the Giant versus Jake Roberts, with the whole story of Andre being afraid of Jake Snake Damien. This was also the first WrestleMania to feature Shawn Michaels, as he and Marty Jannetty debuted as the Rockers in the WWF. And they were taking on the Big Boss Man and Hakeem, the African Dream, aka the One Man Gang. Oh, and did I forget to mention, we also have a great Intercontinental title match between the Ultimate Warrior and Ravishing Rick Rude. Probably my favorite match the Ultimate Warrior was ever in. And, working with a fiery partner like Rick Rude, that's understandable. Though I'm not really a big Ultimate Warrior fan. And, of course, yes, it also has a really good Piper's Pit segment with Morton Downey Jr. and Roddy Piper saying, "Hey, Mr. Downey, give me that smoke." But overall, this was a great WrestleMania and my favorite of the Hulk Hogan era. And yes, the main event, Hulk Hogan versus Randy Savage, the Mega Powers explode. Honestly, I gotta say this was my favorite main event of this, when it comes to the WrestleManias of this era, of the Hogan era, and this one was gotta be the best main event of that era. I mean, I know we had stuff like Hogan versus Warrior from 6 the following year in 1990. And, 2 years before that, we had Hogan versus Andre from WrestleMania 3. But I think WrestleMania 5 had the best main event of that era with Hogan and Savage. And yeah, you had Miss Elizabeth being sent to the back. So yeah, from top to bottom, there's a lot about WrestleMania 5 that kept me invested. Hell, I even loved the stuff with the Hart Foundation taking on Rhythm and Blues, aka Greg Valentine and Honky Tonk Man taking on the Hart Foundation. And overall, this was a really good Mania for what it's worth. I loved the 3-on-2 handicap match for the tag team titles that was Demolition versus the Powers of Pain. the Barbarian and the Warlord, and they teamed with Mr. Fuji, and Mr. Fuji had turned on Demolition. Overall, WrestleMania 5 has got to be my favorite of the Hulk Hogan era. Now, enough of this. Next up, number 9, WrestleMania 12. Now, 12 is not as long as WrestleMania 5 is, but because it's got a much shorter match card, but overall, I think 12 is my favorite of the new generation, and the more and more I think about it, yeah, it is my favorite of the new generation. This WrestleMania was the first WrestleMania for Triple H, and yes, Triple H ended up getting squashed by a no-selling Ultimate Warrior when the Ultimate Warrior returned. And of course, this was also the first WrestleMania to ever feature Stone Cold Steve Austin. This was Steve Austin's first WrestleMania. Oh yes, and Stone Cold Steve Austin does appear a lot on this list. He's involved in a lot of these manias on my list. Even though I'm a Rock fan first, I do love Stone Cold Steve Austin. Even though I love The Rock, even though I put The Rock as number 1 as my favorite wrestler of all time, Stone Cold Steve Austin would be a close second in my opinion. I don't know why. I just sort of just think Steve Austin would be a perfect second. Not that I don't like Steve Austin, because I do love Stone Cold. I do love Stone Cold. Anyway, yeah. We also got a 6-man tag match to start the show off with Camp Cornette with the British Bulldog, Vader, and Owen Hart taking on Jake the Snake Roberts, Ahmed Johnson, and Yokozuna. It was okay for an opening match. It was not too terrible, not too bad. And then, of course, you get the Hollywood backlot brawl between Roddy Piper and Goldust. Oh yes, and this is the second Mania in a row that also features Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper does appear like 3 times on this list. Oh well, 4 times, because he does appear 4 times on my list. But yeah, Roddy Piper and Goldust's backlot brawl at WrestleMania 12 was an enjoyable romp from start to finish. They started in the backlot, and then they get into a high-speed chase that leads back to the arena in Anaheim. I mean, I know most people point their fingers at the Boiler Room Brawl as a pioneer for what was to come with the Attitude Era, but I want to talk about the Backlot Brawl as this one was what laid the groundwork. The Backlot Brawl, as what we would see in the coming years. I would have to point to Roddy Piper and Goldust's Backlot Brawl. Now, originally, yes, it was supposed to be a Miami street fight between Goldust and Razor Ramon, but, you know, shit happens. And, of course, yes, I gotta talk about the final 2 matches, Undertaker and Diesel, and the Iron Man match for the WWF Championship between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. First of all, Diesel and Taker, I'll keep this brief. It was a great battle of the big men we got with Diesel and Taker, and before we got into the Kane match at 14, this by far was Taker's best match so far at that point of his career when it came to his appearances at WrestleMania, because Taker hadn't begun to have those classics yet. You know, we're still getting into the groove of things with Taker. I mean, the 14 match, this would lay the groundwork of some of Taker's best matches. Like, Taker and Diesel was still a great match in its own right. And then, of course, you get the Iron Man match between Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels for the WWF Championship. It was 60 minutes of pure, non-stop action. This match didn't let up for a second. Yes, there were rest holds, but there's always rest holds in wrestling. You can't have wrestling without rest holds. And anyway, having the match end in it having to go to sudden death, and then Shawn Michaels ended up winning. This was also the only Iron Man match to ever, I think, win in the sudden overtime. To ever go into sudden death overtime, with Shawn Michaels ended up winning with the final pinfall, defeating Bret Hart to end Bret Hart's title reign. Number 8, WrestleMania 38 nights 1 and 2. Okay, so we're going to Dallas, Texas now with WrestleMania 38 nights 1 and 2. And I gotta say, in the lead up to this WrestleMania, I wasn't really all that into this WrestleMania during the build. But then all of that changed when I finally watched it. And I gotta say, it was a great WrestleMania in 2022. WrestleMania 38 nights 1 and 2 was probably my favorite of the 2-night WrestleManias that we've had so far since coming into this decade. First, we got to start off with Night 1. Night 1 started off pretty rough with Nakamura and Rick Boogs versus the Usos for the SmackDown Tag Team Championships, but then ended strong with Kevin Owens and Steve Austin at the very end of WrestleMania 38 Night 1. Night 2 started off strong, but Night 2 had the better opening match with RK Bro, Randy Orton, and Matt Riddle versus the Street Profits versus Alpha Academy. It was a really good opening match from bell to bell. And then, of course, you had to have a really weak main event with Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar. Okay, yeah, the Brock Lesnar-Roman Reigns match I was not really looking forward to at all. I mean, because especially since WWE kept hyping this match up like no tomorrow. But of course, you get the women's title matches on this show, on both of these shows. Night 1 had both the Raw and SmackDown Women's Championship. The Raw Tag Team the Raw Women's title match on Night 1 between Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair was a great match. Charlotte Flair versus Ronda Rousey wasn't as good. In fact, I felt like the ending to the match was pretty weak. Like, you're telling me Ronda Rousey kicked out of Charlotte Flair's natural selection and was able to power out of Charlotte Flair's figure 8, but yet she couldn't kick out of a big boot? Yeah, Charlotte Flair ends up winning this match with a big boot, and yeah, that's kind of the one thing that really bugs me about it, is the way the finish was to that match. Charlotte won with a big boot. Of course, Night 2 did have its stinkers as well, like Bobby Lashley versus Omos, because who wanted to see Omos? Not me, because I didn't really give a damn about Omos. And then, of course, we got to talk about the celebrity match of Sami Zayn versus Johnny Knoxville on Night 2, which I actually was entertained by that. That was pretty entertaining. I mean, yes, it was an anything goes match, and yes, the entire cast of Jackass did get involved to help Johnny Knoxville get the victory against a guy like Sami Zayn. Now, yes, if the situation were different, if it would have been a pure wrestling match, I feel like Sami Zayn would have beaten him, because Sami Zayn is a wrestler and Johnny Knoxville isn't. And then, of course, you also had the return of Cody Rhodes, the American Nightmare, on Night 1 of WrestleMania 38. So, overall, 38 was such a solid weekend. Oh, wait, did I forget a match? Oh, yeah, AJ Styles versus Edge. That one was a sleeper hit for me. That one was one of the sleeper hits. And it was a great match from start to finish. And yes, it did play a part in the first chapter of the very beginning of the Judgment Day, of when the Judgment Day would begin to form. I mean, first you would have Priest, and then Rhea Ripley would come in, and then later Finn Balor would come in, and then finally in the fall, Dominic Mysterio would become a member of the Judgment Day, and then following into 2023, JD McDonough would become a member of the Judgment Day. So overall, WrestleMania 38 was such a great WrestleMania. Oh yes, and it was also the very last WrestleMania to ever feature Sasha Banks, as she and Naomi would win the Women's Tag Team Championships. And then, of course, we would get the weeks after WrestleMania, where Vince McMahon would want them to job out to Bianca Belair and Ronda Rousey for some reason, leading to them not liking the decision and wanting to leave WWE. And they basically vacated the titles. Okay, enough of that drama. Number 7, WrestleMania 21. Okay, yes, WrestleMania has been to Hollywood plenty of times. I mean, WrestleMania 39 took place in LA last year at SoFi Stadium, and that was a great WrestleMania, no doubt about it, and there were some things about it that I took issue with the way some matches ended. But also at the same time, between this one and 21, which one I liked more, I still gotta say WrestleMania 21 was a lot better than WrestleMania 39. 39 did have some stinkers on that show as well. I mean, the opening matches on both of those shows, like, I think Night 2 had the worst opening match. I mean, they had 2 bad matches at the start of 39's second night, but then got better as the show went on. While Night 1, on the other hand, had a really mediocre opening match with John Cena versus Austin Theory, with it ending in a really lackluster fashion. But anyway, WrestleMania 21 from the Staples Center in Los Angeles. This was the Mania where John Cena won his first WWE Championship. I am not kidding, yes. And also, not to mention, where Batista won his first World Heavyweight Championship, as both would defeat their respective villains, their brand's respective villains. John Cena would defeat JBL, who was the biggest villain on SmackDown, and dethrone his WWE title reign, to end his title reign. And Triple H and Batista would end the reign of Triple H. Oh yeah, and this is also the second time Motorhead played at WrestleMania live to play Triple H to the ring. And then we would get one of the worst matches on the show with Big Show and Aki Bono. Probably one of the worst celebrity matches, given the fact that Aki Bono was a retired sumo wrestler, and he took on the likes of the Big Show in a sumo match. And yeah, nobody wanted to see it because nobody understood the whole idea of sumo, because it wasn't a thing that us Westerners wanted to see. We also had the most memorable moment of Eugene being saved by Hulk Hogan, after Hulk Hogan saved Eugene from being beaten down by Muhammad Hassan and Daivari. And let us not forget the Roddy Piper's pit with Stone Cold Steve Austin. Sure, it started off with just Piper and Austin, and then Carlito coming out and telling the fans that nobody wants to hear from you two has-beens anymore, only for Carlito to get stunned for his troubles. And then Austin stunning Roddy Piper with the Stone Cold Stunner. Oh, yes. And did I forget to mention the opening match between Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio? It was a great opening match between Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio, two best friends duking it out. Now, Rey has said in the past that Eddie was probably his favorite opponent. He loved working with Eddie. I think a lot of his favorite matches when it comes to... Now, Rey has probably said that his favorite matches mostly happened with Eddie. I mean, if Rey had to pick his favorite rival, it had to be Eddie Guerrero. And I can see why. It's Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero, and yes, this is tragically Eddie Guerrero's last WrestleMania appearance, and it still bugs me to this day. But still, 21 was still a great WrestleMania. I love the movie bumpers that they used to promote this show of the different parodies. And oh yeah, Edge won the Money in the Bank ladder match, defeating the likes of Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, Christian, Sheldon Benjamin, and Kane. Now, originally I wanted Kane to win. You know, back then I was a really big fan of Kane. But as an adult, Undertaker's become more my favorite as an adult. But back then as a kid, I was more invested in Kane. And of course, we had two phenomenal matches. Undertaker versus Randy Orton in the Legend versus Legend Killer match, which I really enjoyed. And Shawn Michaels versus Kurt Angle. And that one was the show stealer. And yes, of course, Trish Stratus versus Christy Hemme should not have happened at WrestleMania. It felt like a match that should have been on Raw. Speaking of which, number 6, WrestleMania 14. Okay, so we're going into the very first WrestleMania of the Attitude Era. And I gotta say, this was a great WrestleMania from start to finish. I mean, this was the first time The Rock was going by The Rock, since he had turned heel the previous year, back in October in 1997. Oh wait, or was it September? Because I know Rock had turned heel in the fall of 97 and joined the Nation. This was his second time defending the Intercontinental Championship at a WrestleMania, and he took on Ken Shamrock. Now, Shamrock basically won this match, but then, of course, the referee reversed the decision and disqualified Shamrock for not breaking the hold. Then Shamrock went ballistic, beating the hell out of The Rock and the entirety of the Nation. And it would also lead to The Rock usurping Farouk's power as the leader of the Nation the following night on Raw. We would also get a great match between Triple H and Owen Hart for the European title. A stellar tag team title match, which was contested in a dumpster match between Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie, aka the late great Terry Funk, took on the New Age Outlaws. And yeah, the following night on Raw, they would have a rematch inside of a steel cage, which would lead to a DX victory, and the New Age Outlaws once again becoming the tag team champions, winning the tag team titles back from Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie. And of course, who could ever forget the Jennifer Flowers interview that The Rock did? And Jennifer Flowers was also at ringside for The Rock's match against Jeff Jarrett. You also had an opening match for a number 1 contenders tag team battle royale, which was just there to fill up time as the opening match, as it also was just there saying, hey, we brought the LOD back and we gave them a new look. And we gave them Sonny as their manager. But of course, yes, the light heavyweight title match was a great match as well. A very underrated match between Aguila and Taka Michinoku. And who could ever forget the final 2 matches? The Undertaker versus Kane, and The Rock, or shall I say, not The Rock, but Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Shawn Michaels for the WWF title. Austin and Michaels for the WWF title as the last match to go on. It was a great main event for the title. I loved that main event. It's probably one of my favorite matches to feature Austin. I mean, it was Shawn Michaels, and sure, even though despite Shawn was battling the back injury, and after this, Shawn would go on a 4-year retirement and wouldn't return to in-ring action until 2002. But overall, I gotta say the show-stealing match was Undertaker versus Kane, brother versus brother. It wasn't a technical masterpiece, it was an all-out monster mash. WrestleMania 14, it was an amazing WrestleMania from start to finish. And yes, it was in Beantown in Boston. Number 5, WrestleMania 31. Okay, so now we go to a different part of California. We go to San Francisco, in the Bay Area of Levi's Stadium. And I gotta say, this WrestleMania I loved. This was when I was getting back into wrestling, and WrestleMania 31 was such a great WrestleMania to come back to. And I gotta say, this one, I did love this one from start to finish. There was a lot of stuff I loved on the show. I liked the opening ladder match for the Intercontinental Championship with Daniel Bryan defeating the likes of Stardust, Wade Barrett, Dean Ambrose, Dolph Ziggler, Luke Harper, and R-Truth. And yes, speaking of which, R-Truth is going to be in another ladder match this year at this coming WrestleMania on Saturday with The Miz to take on 5 other teams for the tag team titles for the Undisputed Tag Team Championships. But overall, you also got a great battle between The Undertaker and Bray Wyatt, which I did like the match between Undertaker and Bray Wyatt. And I'm still sad that Bray Wyatt is gone. It still pains me that Bray Wyatt's gone. I like Bray Wyatt. And I love The Undertaker. Don't get me wrong. I love Undertaker as well. I do love The Undertaker. And of course, yes, you had Triple H versus Sting, which was a Monday Night Wars reenactment. And yes, I know, some people didn't like the way this match ended, and some people didn't like the way it was booked, but most notably, I didn't care, and the fans who were in attendance actually loved it. I mean, hell, they chanted, "This is awesome," right at the word go for this bout between Triple H and Sting. And then, of course, you had to have Seth Rollins versus Randy Orton, and Randy Orton delivering the best RKO I've ever seen Randy Orton deliver when he reversed Seth Rollins' curb stomp into the RKO at the end of their match. And it was only the second match into the show. I also loved John Cena versus Rusev. Probably the most underrated match in WrestleMania history was John Cena and Rusev. And yes, it was the ending of Rusev's undefeated streak. Because at the very beginning, because going into 2015, Rusev had been undefeated and had not been pinned or submitted until he ran into John Cena. And then, yes, you had the filler match of the Bellas versus Paige and AJ Lee. And Paige and AJ Lee ended up beating the Bellas. And yes, this was still going on while Nikki Bella was champion, during her long reign as the Divas champion. Overall, I love WrestleMania 31. I loved its theme song, I loved its set, and I even loved that little moment where Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, later on in the show, after Triple H's match with Sting, had that moment with The Rock and Ronda Rousey, where Ronda Rousey ragdolled Triple H and Stephanie with the help of The Rock. Well, yeah. Speaking of another WrestleMania to feature Ronda Rousey, number 4, WrestleMania 35. Yet again, we're back in New Jersey. This time, WrestleMania 35, the first WrestleMania ever to be main evented by women. In a triple threat match, winner-take-all match, Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, and Rowdy Ronda Rousey. Winner takes all, both the Raw and SmackDown Women's Championships, to be the undisputed Women's Champion. And yes, this was a great main event from start to finish. We had Alexa Bliss as the host of this Mania in the Meadowlands. And, of course, you had the show-stealing match of Kofi Kingston defeating Daniel Bryan in the middle of this show to win the WWE Championship. It was also an emotional moment, because Kofi Kingston had to wait 11 years. It was 11 long fucking years for Kofi Kingston to finally get his one-on-one match for the WWE Championship, and it was worth it. Kofi Kingston and Daniel Bryan, it told an incredible story, and not to mention you had the New Day and Rowan at ringside. You had Rowan in the corner of Daniel Bryan, and you had the New Day in the corner of Kofi Kingston. Of course, you also had the no-holds-barred match between Triple H and Batista, and Triple H finally getting the W on Batista. Something that Triple H had not been able to do in his career, and he finally did it. He finally exercised the demon. He finally got a win over Batista, and it took 14 years, I believe. Yeah, 14 years to finally get a victory over Batista. And it was in a no-holds-barred match with Triple H's career on the line. And, of course, yes, Seth Rollins ended up winning in the opening match of WrestleMania, defeating Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship, just because Brock was upset that he wasn't the main event. Of course, why this WrestleMania isn't in the top 3 mainly comes down to one match, and that was Kurt Angle's match against Baron Corbin. It still leaves a bad taste in my mouth that Baron Corbin was the one they chose, and Baron Corbin was the one that they wasted Kurt Angle in a feud with. And yes, I know it was called Kurt Angle's farewell match because he was retiring anyway. But yeah, Kurt Angle definitely deserved better when it came to his retirement. And of course, I gotta talk about the women's tag team title match, Fatal 4-Way, with the women's tag team title match. It still baffles me, the decision why the hell the Iconics won the women's tag team championships at that WrestleMania, because the Iconics definitely didn't deserve it, and hell, they had a really lackluster title reign when they were champions. And of course, there was the Fatal 4-Way tag team match for the SmackDown Tag Team Championships, which, that one was pretty enjoyable. And of course, I cannot talk about WrestleMania 35 without talking about Randy Orton versus AJ Styles, which, that match was pretty underrated. It was really well worked between Styles and AJ and Randy Orton. Randy Orton and AJ Styles had a really well worked match at WrestleMania 35. So, now we go on to my next pick at the number 3 spot. WrestleMania 19, Seattle, Washington. WrestleMania 19. This one had a lot of good stuff on this show. And yes, it did have one stinker, being The Undertaker's match with Big Show and A-Train, being the one downside of this show. But the rest, it was still up from here. It was still a very good WrestleMania. Oh, and we also had to have the Miller Lite Catfight girls on this show when they were with Tori Wilson and Stacy Keibler in the middle of this show, which I think this followed up Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho and went on before the World Heavyweight Championship match, I believe. And it was like or did it come before the World Heavyweight Championship match? I don't know. Well, I know it came before the World Heavyweight Championship match. It was still there to be filler. And yes, we had a live performance by Limp Bizkit, as Fred Durst performed twice on this show. Once to perform The Undertaker to the ring, performing Rollin', his song Rollin', which The Undertaker was using in the early 2000s. And then the second time to sing his song Crack Addict, which was the main theme of WrestleMania 19. You had a violent and bloody street fight between Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon, in a street fight that was edged 20 years in the making. And also you had a run-in by Roddy Piper showing up. And yes, this is also the very last Mania that Roddy Piper was in. Well, technically, it wasn't the last Mania that Roddy Piper was involved in, but I meant on this list he was involved in, because four out of the 10 Manias that I featured Roddy Piper, he was involved in. And of course, yes, I would also have to talk about the phenomenal final bout between Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, on which The Rock finally got that victory that he had been looking for over Stone Cold Steve Austin. He finally beat Stone Cold Steve Austin in what was Stone Cold Steve Austin's very last match for 19 years, and then Stone Cold would come back at WrestleMania 38 Night 1 and had that match with Kevin Owens, a no-holds-barred match, to defend the honor of the state of Texas that Kevin Owens had been besmirching for weeks to come during the weeks leading up to WrestleMania 38. And yes, of course, I have to talk about Brock Lesnar versus Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship, which was the main event. And of course, Triple H versus Booker T for the World Heavyweight Championship. Although Triple H did beat Booker T for the World Heavyweight Championship, and yes, there are some people who still complain about this to this day, but I didn't have a problem with Triple H beating Booker T, to be honest. I never could find myself hating Triple H. Yeah, I don't hate Triple H. Sorry to some fans who say they don't like Triple H, but I don't hate Triple H. I like Triple H. I think Triple H is cool. And I thought, and of course, I loved every moment on WrestleMania 19 from start to finish. The opening Cruiserweight title match between Rey Mysterio and Matt Hardy was really good. And of course, the triple threat match for the WWE Tag Team Championships, where Chris Benoit and Rhino took on Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin, aka Team Angle, to take on as well as Los Guerreros, who were in that match. And yes, Eddie Guerrero was in this triple threat match. Anyway, yeah, that was WrestleMania 19. And now we go on to number 2. Oh wait, I forgot to mention Trish Stratus winning at WrestleMania 19 as well to win the women's title in a triple threat match with Victoria and Jazz. But yeah, that was a good moment. Number 2, WrestleMania 23. Okay, I did say at the beginning of this video I wasn't a big Donald Trump fan, and I don't really care much for him. Anyway, the Battle of the Billionaires between Vince McMahon and Donald Trump was okay, I guess. I mean, the match wasn't too bad. I mean, yeah, you had Umaga representing Vince McMahon, who was the Intercontinental Champion, and you had Bobby Lashley, the ECW Champion, representing Donald Trump. And whoever won between either one of those guys would get their head shaved. And yes, Vince was the one who ended up getting his head shaved. And yes, to add icing on this cake was Stone Cold Steve Austin as the special guest referee. Because, of course, if anyone was partial as a referee, it was Stone Cold Steve Austin. And yes, and trust me, we'll be getting to the last of Stone Cold's involvements very soon. Of course, you got the third annual Money in the Bank ladder match, which featured Mr. Kennedy, who won this Money in the Bank ladder match. It also featured CM Punk in his first WrestleMania. It also featured the likes of Matt and Jeff Hardy, both of the Hardys. It also featured Edge, Finlay, Randy Orton, and King Booker. And yes, this was a really fun ladder match from start to finish. Although I'm not a really big Mr. Kennedy fan, and yes, Mr. Kennedy ended up winning the Money in the Bank ladder match. But then, of course, fate had to take a turn for the worst for Kennedy. Injury, wellness policy, suspension, a lot. Mr. Kennedy was just straight up cursed. And yes, he would be forced to lose his Money in the Bank ladder match in a match on Raw against Edge. just a couple months after winning it. He's the only Money in the Bank winner to never cash in. And that's sad, really, because he lost his contract to Edge in a singles match on Raw to write him off of television, to have him heal from an injury. But of course, why I like WrestleMania 23 are its 2 world title matches. John Cena versus Shawn Michaels in the main event, as well as Batista versus The Undertaker for the World Heavyweight Championship. This had to be my favorite Undertaker match to ever happen at a WrestleMania. Only to be followed up by Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 25 and Kane at 14. And trust me, the next time I plan to do a WrestleMania countdown, I do plan to do a top 10 Undertaker matches at WrestleMania, counting down the best matches of The Undertaker at WrestleMania, considering Undertaker has competed in the most WrestleMania matches of all time and has the most wins at a WrestleMania. And that's a lot of explanation. Oh yes, I also like the US title match between Chris Benoit and MVP. It was okay. It was a solid US title match. And of course, I didn't really like the Lumberjill match for the women's title with Melina and Ashley Mazzaro. Rest in peace, Ashley. But I wasn't the biggest fan of Melina. Yeah, I gotta say it. I wasn't a Melina fan. I never cared for Melina.
Okay.
And of course, yes, you had the biggest stinker of all of WrestleMania stinkers in Kane versus the Great Khali. I'm still baffled by the decision to have Kane put over Khali. I mean, yes, did WWE really have that much of a big investment in Khali? And yes, I know Kane was just doing whatever he was asked of him to do, because yes, what I always loved about Kane is how he was always a team player. But I still thought the decision to put over Khali was ridiculous. I mean, yes, Khali did eventually win the world title, the World Heavyweight Championship, that summer, but it was ridiculous. And anyway, and the number 1 best WrestleMania, okay, I'm gonna be honest, WrestleMania 17. I mean, come on. What else was it gonna be but WrestleMania 17? Come on. What else was it gonna be but WrestleMania 17? 17 has been held as the GOAT of WrestleMania. It's the greatest WrestleMania of all time. Many fans still claim this as one of the greatest of all time. This was the second WrestleMania to ever feature Eddie Guerrero, as he would defeat Test for the European title. You would have Chris Jericho retain his Intercontinental title in a really good match with William Regal. It was also, I think, William Regal only appeared in 2 WrestleManias, I believe. He didn't really appear in that many WrestleManias, and it's kind of sad, really. You would have my man Kane win the Hardcore Championship against the likes of The Big Show and Raven in a brutal Hardcore title match, and basically the best of the Hardcore title matches to ever come out of WrestleMania. Considering the Hardcore Championship matches at WrestleMania before this weren't as good. But then you had Kane, The Big Show, and Raven actually having the smash hit when it came to WrestleMania Hardcore title matches. And then, of course, yes, this show did have a few stinkers as well, like Taz and the APA versus the Right to Censor, which was the second match on this show following Chris Jericho and William Regal. Some also could also talk about the Gimmick Battle Royal, which I don't mind the Gimmick Battle Royal and how it was like a nostalgia trip for everyone. Yes, I know the wrestlers involved in the Gimmick Battle Royal weren't in the best of shape, but I certainly didn't mind the Iron Sheik winning the Battle Royal and then getting choked out by Sergeant Slaughter at the end of it, it was still a pretty fun blast of the past. I mean, what made this match worth watching was definitely the commentary done by both Bobby the Brain Heenan and Mean Gene Okerlund, as they were the commentators of this match. And it was following up the second TLC match between the Hardys, the Dudleys, and Edge and Christian for the Tag Team Championships, as this was the best of their series of matches in the early 2000s. I mean, especially that spear of Edge spearing Jeff Hardy off the ladder, and also the run-ins by the likes of Lita, Spike Dudley, and Rhino. And my God, did I have to talk about Undertaker versus Triple H. Oh, and yes, of course, this was also the first Mania to ever feature Vince in a match. Yes, believe it or not, this WrestleMania also was Vince's first Mania appearance as a competitor, as he would have a street fight against his own son, Shane, as Shane challenged his father to a street fight to defend the honor of his mother, Linda. And yes, the best moment was the very end of the match when Linda got off from her chair from her comatose state and kicked Vince in the McMahons. Yes, she kicked her husband right in the balls. Then special guest referee Mick Foley helps beat the crap to get his licks on Vince after Vince had assaulted him. And of course, Shane doing his signature coast to coast and pinning Vince 1, 2, 3. Yes. Vince, from his first 4 Mania matches, had lost in all of his Mania appearances. I mean, yes, he did eventually get a Mania win when he was on WrestleMania 38 Night 2, when he challenged Pat McAfee, to have a match with Pat McAfee, after Pat McAfee had beaten Austin Theory, which I forgot to talk about when I talked about WrestleMania 38. Why? Because I just really didn't care much about it, and then Vince got stunned by Steve Austin. But of course, since we're talking about 2001, with WrestleMania 17, I gotta talk about the main event, The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWF Championship, and it was made a no disqualification match. and yes, we see Steve Austin do the unthinkable at this point. He teams up with Vince McMahon to put The Rock down once and for all and win the title. And still, one of the craziest calls Jim Ross has ever made. Stone Cold is drinking a damn beer with Mr. McMahon. Stone Cold has sold his soul to win the WWF title. And of course, yes, this was also Limp Bizkit's first involvement with WWE, or shall I say, with WrestleMania, doing the song My Way as the main theme for WrestleMania 17. And of course, I forgot to talk about Taker and Triple H. And yes, Taker and Triple H had a brutal battle on WrestleMania 17, as well as the technical wrestling match we got between Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit, with Kurt Angle beating Chris Benoit, as it was also Chris Benoit's second WrestleMania, as well as Kurt Angle's second WrestleMania appearance. Bottom line is, WrestleMania 17 is the best WrestleMania of all time. This has been your Digital Super Saiyan 3, and I will see you guys next time for when I do Spring Stampede 1999. See ya!